Listeners everywhere, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, the weekly fix for your screen addiction and a trusted source for discussion of all things film and television. Please keep in mind that for the purposes of this podcast, Joel and Ryan are not acting as journalists, but rather fellow moving picture enthusiasts. All of their opinions should be taken as such. Also, please be warned that while Joel and Ryan may seem like petulant children, they are, in fact, adults who may occasionally use adult language. While they promise to bleep out all the worst words, it's a good bet you will still understand what they were saying. And now, with no further ado, here's Joel and Ryan.
All right, throw yourself up a bowl of mac and cheese. It's the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Hey, everybody, I am Joel.
And I'm Ryan.
And of course, joining us, if you were on the video feed, you know it already. You see his amazing face. Our friend from Los Angeles, Michael Klug.
Hey.
Yay!
Direct from Hollywood. You got some hummingbird action going on there? What are you looking at?
Well, that's why I keep looking up, because we added a second feeder, and that's the first time since yesterday we put it up there. Actually, I just saw him over there. Anyway, it's very exciting.
Yeah, sure. It's like you guys' soap opera. You're all into the different hummingbird relationships and drama and stuff.
Names and you understand behaviors, and that's
fun.
Well, dear listener, we are so happy that you are joining us. It is our yearly Halloween spectacular, and because we are doing this over the internets and stuff, as we have been for this entire pandemic, we thought, well, let's get Michael back again, not just because he's one of our dearest and closest and best friends, but because he happens to know a little thing or two about the horror genre and spooky movies, and he's pretty spooky himself. So no one in Hollywood grows a mustache like that if they don't have a spooky side. There, it's looking good.
It's coming in pretty good, right?
Yeah, it's not bad. All right. So, and again, if you have comments about Michael's mustache, you should feel free to reach out to us at the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on Facebook, or you can comment on this video below. Like and subscribe. All right, so today we are going to go through a giant list, a list of movies that Ryan has assembled. I'm sorry, Ryan. This was your Halloween fare for this year. You watched all of these for this year, or is this just a list you put together of cool movies, of spooky movies?
These are the movies I just watched over the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So this is Ryan's. This is what Ryan does in October. If you've listened to the show before, you know that he goes on, he genres up in October.
We usually spend the opening few minutes on what I watched that week. We used to do that as a rule back in the day. So these shows have been different lately, which is great. Variety's the spice of life. But I used to talk about them as we would go in October, and with the two epic Stephen King countdowns, there's no room for any of it. So we're doing it all on this pickup show, which is going to post, the day after Halloween. Sorry about that. If I really cared about your viewing habits, I would have watched all these in September, and then I could have tipped you off. But
Simpsons Treehouse of Horror is airing tomorrow. Is airing the day after Halloween.
Hey, so there you go.
Thanks, man. So we're legit. You're saying?
Yeah.
It's the whole. It's the Halloween season.
Cool.
And,
I appreciate it.
But honestly, I wanted
Everyone's
to see how much fun were those two Stephen King episodes. Like, those were a blast.
Yeah, they really, really were. I hope everyone gets a chance to either watch or listen to them. They were a lot of fun to do.
It was a neat mix of passion and knowledge, and I think that our disagreements weren't so severe that they were fun arguments instead of instead of us insulting each other's.
To me, it was, the whole list was worth it to see Michael's face the moment I said Running Man on the list for a couple weeks ago. That was like this. It doesn't get any better than this. Is to see someone with that look of pure, that look of pure incredulity of like, what the hell? Anyway, so let's jump into this list. Are we making, because this isn't a countdown. This is just
it's the list. I've tweaked it a little bit. So Michael hasn't seen, he's seen about a third of these, which is a lot. You guys will hear, this is every scary movie I could think to watch that I could safely assume from the get-go wasn't garbage. Because there've been a lot out there where you can really look at them and say, you know what I mean? I'm not a 13-year-old girl anymore. This isn't gonna, so even the bad ones on this list, and there are a bunch, don't have that sort of aspect to them. They're all trying for something a little different. Other than that, it's just a pile of horror movies. So, and roughly, not entirely, but roughly the order I watched them in.
Awesome. All right. Well, let me just.
I just wanted to say, were I still reviewing full time, I probably would have seen the majority of these. But
I think that's right.
Now that I'm not doing that anymore, it's like, oh, there's just probably things I just won't see if I don't have to.
Right. Yeah. But we're catching you while you're still a teeny bit in transition, and you've seen at least a handful of these. Some because you wanted to, but some because you were made to. There's still some hangover from that, so. We're glad to have you along for this. And, maybe if we do a similar show next year, we'll coordinate it better.
Got it.
I'm going to, just so I can read the list, I'm going to remove my sunglasses there. Okay. All right. So now, first up on our super spectacular spooky cinema list, we're going to start with The Descent Part 2.
Well, that one other quick then, action item for our meeting. Almost all of these were within the last 3 years. They were just out on video this year. There's a couple that I'm a year behind on. You guys will see. This one though is 10 years old now ish. I mean, this isn't new at all. But I had never seen it before. I heard it was okay, but I heard it wasn't great. And I hold The Descent in a very sort of special place in my heart. So it was easy to just skip it. But a company in Australia, Umbrella Films, put out a Blu-ray of it finally. It's never been out in high definition. And I thought, it's $10 on eBay. Here we go. I'll pick it up. I wanted to buy the Umbrella version of the original Descent because it has the original lighting in it, which sorry for video, it's what you want, right, Joel? That's what they want. Just making sure. It's brightened the Lionsgate video domestically, which is kind of nice for home. I don't want to say, oh sure, brighten up the filmmaker's movie, but it helps a little with Descent. It just helps you follow it at home. It was a hard movie to follow completely in the theater because it's so dark, and in the home video it's good. But I wanted to see it dark again with the blacks true, and I bought both of these and I watched them both together.
I was going to say, probably with the way TVs come out of the box when people set them up, because vast majority of people don't take the time to set up their TVs and to research how are you going to get the truest blacks. They're in showroom mode. And so so if you put The Descent on your home, even on Blu-ray, you're going to be watching it and you're just going to be getting these pixelated black boxes like everywhere. And I'm sure that probably played into why they lightened it up.
Just a tip. I'm not going to tell people how to calibrate their TVs or anything, although we could do a show on that. It would be the most boring show ever. But just a tip for you guys out there, those black bars that y'all hate on the top and bottom of a film like The Descent, those are supposed to be black. Just if you do nothing else, make those black and your life will be just a million times better. Whatever controls it takes. It's hard for me to say I don't care because it matters to me. If I came into your home, Joel will tell you I can't not fix your TV for you. I'm compelled to. Don't invite me over. Make the black bars black. Anyway, on to The Descent before we get totally.
So this is the sequel. The cave dwelling monsters. This is no one believes our heroine, and so the sole survivor of a spelunking exploration gone horribly wrong is forced to follow the authorities back into the caves where something awaits.
Yeah, it's part 2, so major spoilers for The Descent if you've never seen it in that synopsis. But I think even you in the first few minutes of The Descent can tell that nothing good is going to happen. That film is special it just is really, really well done. I don't know quite how to explain it. It's just really scary, and it's really sort of it's emotionally overwrought, but in the best possible way. The drama between these ladies who go on this cave exploring mission is real and justified, and it all comes out. Every emotional and horrific stone is unturned in that film, and we both Michael and I love it. You want to tell the story of how our
Well,
descent connection?
you introduced me to this, Mr. Harris. It was I ran when I was still living in Chicago, so this was 2005, I guess.
Yeah,
You sent me some burned copy, apparently because it had been released in the UK, and I
right.
didn't know anything. And so you sent me this thing, and you'd printed out a cover of it, so it's Shauna McDonald, Sarah's face in
Yep.
black and white,
It's the
and you're
UK poster with it cut into a square is all
yeah.
it is.
And
But
the
yes,
only thing you said to me is this is one of the scariest things I've seen in a long time. So that's it. That's
yeah,
all I had going in. So Elwood and I sat down and watched this. I mean, to say we were blown away is the biggest understatement because all those things you said that it is a character piece until it's not.
right.
So, but the fact is that you have 50 minutes of screen time until the event.
The other shows up.
And it's so well done. It's beautifully acted. It's a scary, scary movie. And when we finished it, it was like, this is one of the juiciest films I have seen in the longest of times. And we introduced this to a bajillion people after the fact just to watch their reaction. And of
Sure.
course, then they released it in the US and the trailer shows the big wonderful moment. And I'm like, you stupid morons. But so of course we were very excited to jump into two. And from what I remember, I watched it once. Of course, I will never watch it again. It was garbage. It was useless. I'm like, this is stupid. And I think what the problem is with sequels that just can't live up to it is you try not to let them diminish your experience with the first one,
Right.
but they do. No matter how you try and hold those things true and close to your heart, you
Right.
screwed it up.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
you
a
made
real
this
common
yeah.
argument out there. Hey, you still have the original. What are you complaining about?
Yeah.
The very last movie on our list is a big time sequel, and we'll talk about how this can work and why it works when it works. In this case, I'm with you. It just doesn't work. But I knew that. It's just been years of me avoiding this film, and then finally watching it. And when I watched it in the best presentation of it possible, and I think that helped because the design on hand is still really pretty good. There's a couple of creepy new ideas, new spins on what's going on in it. Gavin O'Hurley, Josh Dallas. There's some good new actors brought on board too to be sent down there that, frankly, that we're not going to have time to get to know. They're going to have to earn our sympathies somewhat.
But it's even the case.
So it's
with,
not
like,
as bad, I think, as you feel, even though it's terrible compared to the original. But it is.
One
It
of
is
the things that
sadly
stood
a
out to
sequel
me is that,
probably best left
I
avoided.
thought Natalie Mendoza and Shauna McDonald were really fantastic in the first film, as were the rest of the cast.
Yeah.
And then,
And they're all brought back for new video
yeah,
camcorder footage, which they were happy to do because they all kind of love each other, and it was just a weekend for them to do
yeah.
it. So there's this, and the producer, the director Neil Marshall, has the story idea and producer credit, so he endorsed
Yeah.
it. That mine shaft that they re-enter the caves in, I think that's tense and kind of creepy, and there's some cool stuff going on in it, but it's everything a horror movie is, which is it's got really clumsy, too clever by half dialogue. The actors I think are good in it, so they make it work as best you can, but it shouldn't be there. There should be a serious mission to what they're trying to accomplish in that film, and that is lacking. I would also say that the intense need to deliver a jump scare at the very end of the film without spoiling it doesn't seem to serve anybody's purpose. Like the filmmakers, the audience, the characters doing the act seem to not be serving themselves terribly well. Like the whole idea of it, when you think about it for a couple of seconds, which typically is the last thing you think about it when the credits roll on a movie, is no, that doesn't make any sense at all. And that's frustrating. So
it's just not good. It's not.
So it's a letdown. I just say it's a decently well-crafted letdown. It's also, compared to The Descent, and I may not have noticed this if I didn't watch them back to back. It's bright, man. You can see everything. That part of the brilliance of The Descent when you watch it is you can barely see what you're supposed to, let alone you can see everything that it needs you to see. You can barely see. Everything in that movie is lit by the lights, by the little glow sticks, by whatever, a torch. And that's the miracle of it. When you watch The Descent Part 2, you're like, where's all this light coming from? I mean, it's not coming from the guy's helmet. Where's it coming from? And it's coming from lights on a movie set.
It's coming from the bigger budget.
Yeah.
Because the first was a success.
All right. Well, let's move on to our next film. Which I'm assuming is a sequel to So I Married an Axe Murderer. No, I'm wrong. Okay, no, this movie is Honeymoon.
This is another semi-old one, 2014, and then we're kind of into the new season. Honeymoon is great indie horror. I'll just say it stars Harry Treadaway and Rose Lely. It's populated almost entirely with English people, which is weird because it takes place in America. And not only that, it was shot in the Carolinas or something, Georgia. So there's no reason for it to have only British actors, but it does. And sometimes that's great because they're cool. Both those actors are fantastic. Rose, from The Good Fight on CBS All Access, and most of you from Game of Thrones. She's Mrs. Kit Harington. Sorry. But they had a love affair in the show that turned into a real life marriage, which apparently is still happily chugging along. Harry, I know from a bunch of when he was a teenager, he was in a ton of stuff. My favorite thing of his was City of Ember. Anyway, they're great. They're just going on their honeymoon. They're going to her old cabin in the woods that she spent her summers at, and it was her idea to have this romantic thing. And they really sell a real that real honeymoon stage of a relationship, infatuation and love. And they, along the road, they go to the old corner store and they bump into one of her friends, and until he recognizes her, he's completely psycho to them. And then he's like, oh, it's you. Oh, let me make us some lunch or something. And she's like, oh, okay. And Harry's, what? Like, he's not able to switch gears like that. And then Rose one night wakes up. Sorry for using accurate names for character names, but it's hard to remember all these characters. She wanders out into the woods. And he finds her.
Good old B.
B, that's right. It's important. The names are important. B wanders out into the woods, and he finds her, and nothing in their relationship or their honeymoon is the same after that. And I don't want to overhype it because it's a really modest film. Like, it really was done with 5 people in a very tight budget, but it's a very super simplified version of another huge movie we'll be talking about very on the list. The tagline for it, which I think spoils a little, but I think it might be the final thing that gets you to maybe watch this, was first the marriage or something. I don't know. First the marriage, then the ritual.
Yep. After the ceremony comes the ritual.
The ritual. There you go. That's it's creepy, and it's pretty well done, and it's extraordinary. Joel and I always talk. Joel loves layered actor performances, and I always talk about the joy of watching a person playing a character, trying to pretend to be a different character. Like, I find that when you're pulling that off as an actor, you're just in magic land. And Rose and some other people have something similar like that to have to do, and it's you're very aware of it, and yet it's very mysterious the whole time. It's a neat film.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, just real quick question. I mean, because obviously it sounds like cabin in the woods type scenario, which
Yeah, but it's not
has
a
been done 1,000. But I'm saying it's like when you take a couple people, put them in a cabin. Obviously, there's a million places you can go. So how does this
right.
rank as far as Because
You have to be able to embrace a little bit of ambiguity. In Cabin in the
okay.
Woods, you're clear what's going on the whole
Well,
time,
no,
and
I
it
don't mean
is
Cabin in the Woods the film. I'm saying Cabin in the Woods the trope.
the trope. I get it, but I just recognizing all those things. You have to be okay with ambiguity. What's happening here is explained a lot by the time it's over, but it isn't ever. You just never really know for sure what was going on, and it's that kind of movie where sometimes you can be like, what? And sometimes you can be like, I don't want to know. I know enough. I'm glad this is over. I'm relieved.
Isn't that interesting? When I was still reviewing, I had back and forth constantly in these movies that kind of had that ambiguity. I'm like, I love it. I can make my own decision. And then there's other ones I'm like, you're stupid. You didn't tell me anything.
Right.
I could never be satisfied. But I guess that's a matter of what they've given you ahead of time for you to digest. It's like, it's enough or it's not. And it's never consistent.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it is what is chosen to give to you, how important it is that they give it to you. And, and frankly, how the quote unquote giving it to you is executed.
Right?
Yeah. So
no spoon feeding.
I can promise you some people will be frustrated by this one, but
Sure.
some people will be because they, I just wasn't. I thought it was good.
Great. All right. This next movie I was hoping was going to be Jacquet's return to our screens. But it's called
Jacquet, please.
Because it's called Mary.
Mary.
No, but this is called Mary. But it does have Gary Oldman in it and Emily Mortimer.
And if it didn't have them, if it had like Denise Crosby and what's his face from Pet Sematary, it would have been intolerable. They help, but they don't really save this one. I was joking about it when I was reading about it. I was like, a yachtsman goes out on a yacht and the yacht is haunted. It's like, but it really is this guy who gives boat tours for a life, who saved up a nest egg. He buys an old ship that reminds him of the one that his dad taught him to sail on. Oh. And then he takes the family out on a test drive to see if they can do, give it a run and see if they can do tours with it.
Yep, a pretend tour.
A 3-hour tour, like a 3-week tour of the Caribbean. And it's the boat is, I don't think it's spoiling it to say if the boat is possessed or it's haunted or whatever.
Is the boat named Mary? Is that the...
Yeah, the boat is named Mary. And it's this cool hodgepodge of lots of different generations of boats, of large scale sailing boats. So, it is well performed. That helps. Gary Oldman, not so much because he agreed to do it, so he must have saw something in the material, but he shows up and does a decent job. You'd expect him to. It's fun to watch him not to just play a guy, a lower class.
Sure, yeah.
You know what I mean? Dude, like that in and of itself is a relief when it comes to him.
Yeah, it's not like he was asked to do.
Yeah. It's Mortimer's movie to carry
time on Mary.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not like he was asked to do Dracul.
Right, exactly. It's Mortimer's film to carry, and she does everything in her power to make that movie work. And
why do I know Emily Mortimer the name, but I can't picture who that is?
She's the other Emily from England.
She was on
Blunt, the other.
Yeah, no, she was in I know her. Bet my favorite thing was she had a guest arc on 30 Rock where she had avian bone. She had avian bone syndrome, and so anytime anyone shook her hand, she'd go, "Ow, my bones."
She played this British, like vegan person, like girlfriend of Alec Baldwin's that Alec couldn't even touch. She was the most emotionally distant character like ever in the history.
She was on the Newsroom, the HBO.
She starred in the
Newsroom.
Okay, I recognize. I just pulled up her picture. Okay, I recognize.
Oh, there you go.
She's a good actor. It's the actors that drew me to it, and haunted sailboat. That sounds fun. Unfortunately, whatever they could have done with that idea, they didn't really do. They tried to do something different in their defense, but it's just isn't scary and it's kind of boring, unfortunately.
I'm keeping score. Honeymoon, I'm interested. Mary, Oceans of Time, no.
All right, next
It's
up
a big,
is
you guys. I don't hate it. It is a noble attempt to tell a decent story,
Okay.
but I can't recommend it to anybody. If you watch 30 horror movies, then getting it in the rotation is not going to kill you. But if you
Got it.
watched 3, Mary should
Don't-
not be one of them. It just shouldn't be.
Okay.
All right. Next up is a movie called The Silence, which sadly I was hoping it would be about the villains from Doctor Who, but it is.
Is this
no,
the Tucci film?
Yep,
It
it's
is.
Stanley Tucci. It's the Tooch and the Shipka.
So I've actually seen the ads for this, and it was kind of like,
It's a really less sophisticated, like almost exact version of
Bird Box.
no,
The Krasinski film.
yeah, the quiet place. or
Quiet
whatever
Place,
that was
yeah.
called.
When the world is under attack from terrifying creatures who hunt their human prey by sound, 16-year-old Allie Andrews, who lost her
It's
hearing at
Literally
13,
the exact same thing. The
and her
creatures are
family
even
seek
look the
refuge in a
same.
remote
They're-
haven.
The creatures even look the same. They're small. They're not human sized. They're the size of. They're like albino bats that are.
Yeah,
more like size
the
of
poster
peacocks.
here, the poster on IMDb that they have here, yeah, it kind of makes it look like the birds. But
Okay.
like
It has
the
some
birds were
decent
bats.
sequences. It's a Netflix movie. Tucci as a family man. Again, you're watching a guy who is full of ticks and quirks as an actor and is drawn to stuff that's a little out there. And you're watching him just try and play a guy trying to save his sort of family, and he in an impossible situation. These blind creatures they kill people, then they nest in them, and for every person they kill, like 12 of them are born out of it. So they're taking over the earth. It has the exact same trope where one of the children is deaf, and so the family knows sign language. So it's such a ripoff, in fact, that they can't have been a ripoff. These things had to have been developed independently,
Probably, yeah.
or they'd be in court against each other. There's just no,
right.
Wow.
But for a low rent, Michael, you didn't even really love The Quiet Place. I didn't love it either, but I think I liked it a little better than you. Just because I think I liked the metaphorical value of the parenting, as a horror situation. I thought that was pretty rich. This is similar. It's a tough spot, and they run into some very creepy religious,
of course,
Stephen King like villains late in the film, and that they suck. They're hard to deal with because they're not dealing with this rationally, the situation, and it's not bad. It's fun. It's a fun Netflix movie that if Netflix keeps recommending it to you and you want to watch something spooky for 90 minutes, The Silence is okay, but you've seen it all before too.
It sounded like a hard pass for me.
I'm trying to sell these as what they are.
No, but I mean, but there are those things. It's like, because we did watch the trailer, and I'm like, I mean, I guess if there's nothing else, and
yep.
I mean, I do like Tucci,
and if Stanley Tucci's coming over for dinner, you'll probably like, okay, I'll give this a watch.
I better check it out and be like, hey, you were really in that movie. You were there.
When Tucci comes to dinner, he's not going to want to talk about The Silence. He's great in it. He really is. But that's, and that's great. And he got paid for it. It's all good. And the movie's not even terrible, but it's not one of those career highlight things. There's just nothing like that in it. So.
All right, next up is a movie called In the Tall Grass.
This is the start of a 3-film Stephen King addendum here.
Yes, after hearing a young boy's cry for help, a sister and a brother venture into a vast field of tall grass in Kansas, but soon discover there may be no way out, and that something evil lurks within.
People, it's not a cornfield, but it's essentially people trapped in a cornfield for an entire movie.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something that's the cause of that's keeping them there and making them lose track of time. And time is not reality. It's one of those puzzle films. It was directed by what's his name?
Vincenzo Natali,
who very famously made The Cube, which is a bunch of people trapped in a bunch of different cubes. Cube is a great old school one set horror movie. It's about as good as they come. Even it's not perfect, but it's really, really good. This is similar. I mean, I get why he was brought on board to do it. I get the appeal. Stephen King has some, as he always does, he's got some interesting ideas in it. I don't know that they pay off. If you like some intense sort of horror moments mixed with goofiness, this could be a movie for you. Patrick Wilson plays Patrick Wilson, who's a really good actor, but he plays just a dad who just adapts to the situation way too easily. He literally says this like 3 times. He's like, "Hey, blah 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 is the name, real estate's the game." He's that kind of guy. He's already really weird and an annoying real estate agent guy like you might meet in life. And then when he finds himself in the tall grass, he's
a handsomer Ned Ryerson.
Essentially, and he goes really over the top of that. That to me was sort of fun to watch, and the movie was okay, but
Now, it's a novella or was it a full novel from King?
This was a novella.
Okay. Because I remember, I haven't seen any trailers or anything for this, but I do remember seeing like an ad on a billboard or something. Yeah.
I think this is another Netflix release.
Netflix
it is Netflix,
cranking
yeah.
this stuff out.
Yeah.
Yep. At least as of last year, they were. All right. So next up,
it's Stephen King. I'm just saying, it's not bad, but trapped in the tall grass. And I'm not telling you what the cause of it all is, and I'm not going to, but it might be like, wow, that's different for some of you who've seen a lot of these. For those of you who don't watch many of them, you might be, that's what's doing this. There's a legit idea that you might react to.
All right, I'll put this at the middle ground for possibility because it's King.
It's about
Patrick, does Patrick Wilson go shirtless at all when the corn gets really hot?
No, but he gets very sweaty and he is only wearing a business shirt.
All right. Okay. Well, there's your extra.
he has all the best fun quotable lines in the film. If it were a better film, we'd remember some of these lines because they kind of are that good, but it's just a made for Netflix high concept single location film.
We'll see.
All right. So next up is another Stephen King film, 1922. This is from a couple of years ago in
on
2017.
The whole of these Netflix films, I enjoyed this much more. This actually has there's a kernel of really devilish, just sort of meanness and cruelty at the heart of this thing. It's rural Gothic, like if Edgar Allan Poe was from Nebraska instead of Baltimore. This is like the kind of thing he would have written. I don't think it's perfect. It's a modest production. For being that it's really just this nugget of an idea that it's about. It goes on for a little too long. But I like Thomas Jane. I like really the whole cast. I thought that the mood and atmosphere of the thing was very fun. It is not a hack and slash horror movie. There's not a big body count. It's almost purely psychological, which some people won't like. But
let me tell you my experience. So I reviewed this at Screamfest a couple of years ago. It premiered on the big screen at Screamfest. So I reviewed it. I remember giving it a 4 out of 5. 2 things of note: Thomas Jane was there for the showing, and he was barefoot. Just interesting little bit of.
He's an odd duck. I enjoy him.
Yeah, and so. But I remember very vividly, because of course I was reviewing 10 films, watching all the shorts, so my mind was probably a little crowded for that 10-day period.
Yeah.
But I remember walking home afterward, and I'm like, because I usually try to get some thoughts down immediately, so I don't, because sometimes it could be days before I can actually go in and finish the review. So I'm like, okay, but I remember walking out of it, and I'm like, I don't know what happened. Like, not that I wasn't paying attention, but the film felt very disjointed, I guess. Like it was hard to just kind of grab on. I don't know if that's the way to do it.
It's entirely from that character's point of view, and he is not a reliable narrator.
Yeah.
So you can piece together what happened, but you have to kind of do that because there's certain realities of his existence he's not willing to face. I enjoy that because it's different and it's work to kind of keep up with it. not
for,
really.
real quick, for those who haven't seen it here, let me just quick give the synopsis because we've been talking about this. A simple yet proud farmer in the year 1922 conspires to murder his wife for financial gain, convincing his teenage son to assist, but their actions have unintended consequences. So that's I just want to give people a little bit of, the world that we're in for this.
Well, the
We're
other
talking
thing
about
that stuck out to me,
psychological.
not necessarily that I couldn't follow it because of the narration.
I
think
get what you're
something
saying
about it that it's almost bland. Like I can't really remember any big set pieces that kind of give you those highlights and lowlights. Like
right.
it just feels very one level, and I think that's why I had difficulty not really getting a review. I mean, I reviewed it and I did give it high marks for a lot of things, but it just kind of didn't do anything. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Anyway.
I think that's legit. I think it's that way by design. I really do think it's from his point of view, and he does. We see a lot of these movies where we're seeing things in the shadows or whatever. However, those things are married to our emotions. Are meaning whatever characters we're talking about in these situations. He's fighting to deny any of this is happening at every step. And for that reason, you're never really diving in full bore to anything that's happening. A little bit at the very end, but even at the very end, compared to the kinds of things we're used to seeing in films like this, it just doesn't go all the way. So I admired it for that, but I get exactly what you're saying. You don't look back at it. I remember all the let's escape the albino bats moments. Like I remember every one of them because they're all choreographed and set up, and they're told in this way that like is audience friendly. And in 1922, you don't have that. You just don't have that same kind of storytelling.
And I realize the thing is, it's one of those films that I watched it, I was semi-entertained, I give it high marks, but I will never see it again, and I don't remember anything. Like within a day,
and it's on
Netflix.
Like, you can't add it to your library. You can't. I mean, you can go back and watch it whenever you want, but it exists in this same place like season 2 of Orange is the New Black exists. I mean, people who loved it watched it in 2 days, and then it's just on to the next thing in their life. You know what I mean? Streaming is weird that way. It's great that way, but it's also weird that way. It didn't take all of the winter of 2016 to watch something. You blew through it. It's gone. My reaction's the same. I'm not going to watch 1922 again, but I was fairly impressed with what I saw when I was watching it.
Okay. How about
So in this final of Stephen King little trio we have here is a movie we have talked about before in the in
I finally saw
countdowns. It Chapter 2. Let's not spend a lot of time on this just because we have a big list, but
and there's nothing to say except that I was not having seen it. I'm just playing advocate for it because nobody else was on the Stephen King shows. Rob was trying, but his heart wasn't in it. So, and it was on his top 20. It was number 19, right above Carrie. Sorry, Rob. He's not here to defend himself. Sorry, bro. It's I still think I probably liked it more than all of you guys. That said, it's just everything you say. It's so wrong-headed and so stupid and so just terrible. And it didn't have to be that way. The parts of the book that they adapted, they just should have adapted. Yeah, you wouldn't have had giant CGI Paul Bunyans attacking and stuff like that, but your movie would have been so much better if it didn't have that stuff in it. One hand reaching out to grab you from the darkness is a primal fear. 36 tiny CGI hands reaching out to grab you from the darkness is fake and false and feels that way when you're watching it. And the whole movie is like, what are you thinking? What are you thinking? It squanders a great look, a huge budget for an R-rated film, a fantastic cast that's perfect pretty much across the board. The big finale, when it finally comes, I think is better than terrible. But by the time it's almost a 3-hour movie, and by the time you're there, you're just not. You've seen so many otherworldly CG creatures and thrills and spills that it just sucks and is frustrating. And it really is them compensating for not having the big money moments that all take place in the past in the book. It's as simple as that. They have the big finale, which they kind of do okay in the present, but the rest of it is just, it's, that guy, the director Muschietti, he made a film called Mama with Jessica Chastain, which is a neat little movie.
Yeah.
And I would say that It Chapter 1 is the first half of Mama, and It Chapter 2 is the second CG laden, nothing is hidden, everything is stupid ending.
Yep.
And it's not cool. It's not cool. You could have done away with the entire middle of that film. There are little missions they go on. They don't grow as people. We don't learn anything new about them. It's all full of just big, expensive, nonsensical garbage that's not scary. It literally does everything you can to take the fear out of something that it was primal and scary. And
the only thing
the conveniently anonymous early deaths in the film they're unforgivable because they don't mean anything to anybody that's actually part of the story, which is really frustrating.
Well, the only thing I'll say very quickly,
even though they are
this
right
was
out
released
of the book.
last year, I didn't see this until the pandemic. So I saw this probably in April. You're talking about this, and I'm like, I don't remember anything.
I don't remember.
That's how quickly it moved. It's like done. I saw it. I can say I saw it, but
I've got my 2 cents into it. We don't need to belabor it. It Chapter 2 it's a pretty decently reviewed film. It was a big hit. It's a travesty, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right, so
there are things in there that could have been great, and they just aren't. And it's and it's not 3 things. It's like 24 things that all could have been good and aren't. And when you go through that cycle again and again during a story, you really do start to resent it. So,
fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, won't get fooled again.
Shame on me twice.
All right. Next up is a movie from this past year. Imelda Staunton stars in Amulet.
Oh, Amulet, another British indie horror by one of my favorite actors. Wrote and directed this thing.
Romola Garai,
who's I don't know how to explain what she is. She's like this British costume drama princess. Basically.
Oh yeah, her. I know.
She's never been in a. She was in a movie called Ghost of Mars a few years. Not Ghost of Mars. Something of Mars. Last Days on Mars.
Yeah,
a few years back, and she was all like, I jumped at the chance to do this. We didn't know, what it would be, but that nobody asks me to do these kinds of movies. So I got to wear an astronaut suit and I got to get chased by zombies and stuff. I mean, it was awesome.
This movie
now she drummed up the money to make this indie horror movie, and it's hard to say what I think about it. Some movies are like that, especially these types of movies where what is it? It means something other than what it means, and you just have to suss it out and think about it some. And it was really horribly unpleasant, and yet I was sort of hypnotized by it. Read the synopsis for what good it'll do, Joel.
Sure. An ex-soldier living homeless in London is offered a place to stay at a decaying house inhabited by a young woman and her dying mother. As he starts to fall for her, I'm assuming the young woman, he cannot ignore his suspicion that something sinister is going on.
Sinister is the word I would use. I can't really. Imelda Staunton is the recognizable actor, and I didn't know anybody else. It's only a few people. It only really takes place in this house, and it shows a little bit of his war experiences, which are interesting. He manned a checkpoint on a road in the middle of nowhere during the war. So it's this lonely, weird, sort of haunting outpost. He brings that with him into the present. We've seen this stuff before, he comes into the creepy house and falls in love with a nice girl. I mean, you think you either believe that's all going to work out and he's going to save her, or you just know in your gut, it's just going to go bad and wrong. And this movie plays fair with you the whole time. It never suggests there's any hope in the world for anybody. It's just a huge downer and a mean trick played on both our characters and the audience. It's a cruel heartless story of a film, and I just never dreamed that could come from Romola. I'm just stunned by it. Knowing her, you don't have to know her though. It's man, it's out there. It was really pretty good. I recommend it, but
the title of one review here. The title of one review here says, "For people who like their horror movies weird," or no, for horror fans who like their movies weird. So that's Amulet.
It reminds me, it's like low budget version with far less stuff in it of the remake of the Argento film from a few years back.
Sure.
Suspiria.
Yeah, Suspiria. It's not like that because that was a huge production with stars and everything, and that was a big elaborate thing with elaborate effects. This isn't like that, but it's a guy in this tiny little world of women, so it has a different twist to it because of that.
Mm-hmm.
But it just has that, and there's no novelty deaths that are off the hook like Argento. But it reminds me of the first part anyway of an Argento movie where everything feels wrong, and making me feel that way is impressive. It's not easy to do, especially when I'm in the middle of watching 30 horror movies. I was impressed by that.
All right. So next up is H.P. Lovecraft. People are rediscovering some Lovecraft. Michael, I know you've been going on a Lovecraft journey, or went on a Lovecraft journey.
Mm-hmm.
This is a movie called Color Out of Space, the first of our many Nicolas Cage films that we'll be talking about.
Let me say this before you start, Ryan. Do not give me any spoilers on this. Don't even try, because this is something I actually truly want to see, and I'm surprised that I have not. Well, I just read the source material like 6 months ago. So anyway,
is it okay if he reads the
Here's the synopsis. It's literally one sentence. A secluded farm is struck by a strange meteorite which has apocalyptic consequences for the family living there and possibly the world.
Yep. I read, let me just quickly say, I read a 20-piece collection of some of Lovecraft's best, and this is my first exposure other than a lot of 80s films from Stuart Gordon. But this was one of my favorites. I think it was one of my top 3. That with At the Mountains of Madness and Shadow over Innsmouth. So these were my 3 favorites. So when I saw this was coming right around the same time as me reading it, it's like it's high on my list to see, but I don't know why I haven't yet.
Richard Stanley made a movie in 1990 or so called Hardware. And and despite the fact that he wasn't for decades able to really make any other films, it made him a legend in the horror community. He was famously he made the movie version of the album Brave by a band called Marillion, which is my favorite band of all time, which is full of great images and it kind of amazing like rock album movie that you could make. So he's a visualist who's got an interesting style. His dream was to do a big scale remake of The Isle of Dr. Moreau, which he mounted and then was fired for a week in. Val Kilmer got him fired. There's a whole documentary about that drama. He's a guy that brings a lot of baggage with him, and now he's quietly, as indie horror has taken off in the DVD era and now especially in the streaming era, he's a accomplished horror director the studios hate for hire, and he's doing these bits of work. I won't talk about Color Out of Space. It's Lovecraftian, in a true sense. I was watching the Lovecraft County or Country or whatever the hell the HBO show was, which I bailed on for 2 reasons. One, I just hated it. That's a good reason to stop watching the show. And the other reason was because there's certainly hints of Lovecraft in it, but it's anti-Lovecraftian. It's a big, gross, violent splatter fest of a thing. And that's Lovecraft can have some of that certainly in it, but it's about existential dread, and it's about how your personality is warped and twisted by these things that aren't acceptable to be able to comprehend or understand in your everyday life. And this movie gives you that. It delivers that in a great way. So the
No,
devil's in the
I
details,
definitely
and
wanna
I
see it.
won't spoil. I don't need to spoil any of that.
Well, I
It's
mean,
a
okay, well,
visual
here's my
feast.
question, because since I just and again, I love this particular story. Is it pretty true to
I
the
haven't read
source?
it. I
Oh,
haven't
you
read it.
haven't? Okay.
But it felt damn Lovecraftian to me.
Okay.
And Nicolas Cage got to break out his douche voice, which I haven't heard since Vampire's Kiss. The what are you talking about? Like you can say what you want about Nick and his work recently, but he's not that guy that he used to do a lot in the 80s. He's not existed. He's not really a part of this movie either, but he breaks out. He shows up for bits and pieces of it. And I don't think that's a spoiler. It's a fun, but I don't know. To me, that's Lovecraft. It's this fun, wild, what the hell?
Yeah.
But also, oh my God, it's
All right. That's highest on the list.
There you go. All right. Next up, Sea Fever. Sea Fever. It's what a disco boat. No, the crew of a West of Ireland trawler marooned at sea struggle for their lives against a growing parasite in their water supply.
This is a good litmus test of a film because Michael didn't like this. He didn't hate on it, but I read your review of it in preparation for this. He just didn't appreciate anything that they put up there the way I think they had hoped people would. And I did. I appreciated a lot more of it than you did. It asinine. The marketing people, whoever put this on there, this was the phrase they kept saying was, it's a cross between The Thing and The Abyss. If you showed up to Sea Fever thinking you were going to get The Thing or The Abyss, I mean, yeah, it sucks. There's no question. I mean, that cannot have been and should not and was not my expectation when I watched it, but I dug it. The reason I dug it more is because I liked the simplicity of the impossible situation that they find themselves in. And I think in a post-COVID world where people are reacting to this infection, and it is very much an infection, that really does threaten everybody in existence. In that way, I guess it is kind of like The Thing. And people react to that in very human ways. I thought that was cool. Michael says the characters were a little impenetrable. I can't disagree. I would only say that especially the Hermione Corfield, who plays kind of the lead, this mousy scientist that's on this boat full of all these working class Irish people. I liked her. I know people like her. The whole setup started with a party that was going on in another room that she wasn't taking place in because she doesn't like to talk to people. Yeah. I get that that's a challenge when you're making a movie, when your character is like that. Yeah. But I thought she was an impossible situation and did the best she could under the circumstances, even though she's got no charisma and there's no reason anyone would listen to her, and they don't for the vast majority of the film. That can be an exercise in frustration. But for a small indie horror movie with some neat ideas and a neat atmospheric trapped location and cool lighting, and the ocean is moody, there's a lot to like there, even though it isn't greater than the sum of its parts.
I mean, my main thing that I remember one of my gripes, because it's been a few months since I reviewed this, but one of my big gripes was some of the closure ideas for some of the people, which were just completely nonsense. I'm like, you failed so miserably to give us something. You didn't.
I kind of agree with that.
I didn't really care for the people anyway, but
I kind of agree with that. I just that part.
We get this.
That part, the goofy science person who can't get along with other people and can't even explain herself very well, mixed with these working class freaking out, unwilling to accept what is happening to them, even though it's right in front of their eyes, and even them being that. And not being evil foils for her. Like, you sympathize with them to some degree, but there aren't characters that you like and want to spend time with in this film.
That was the problem.
Is true.
And it's, with a few rare exceptions, 10 minutes in, I'm like, no.
Yeah. But Connie Nielsen, Dougray Scott, these are real actors who do the real work of
But
making the situation feel real.
I mean,
That's
one
what
of
I
the
appreciate.
disconnects for me, I think, too, was the accents were so heavy
Yeah.
that you were literally leaning forward the entire time trying to decipher. It's like you could have probably benefited from subtitles because
Or
it was
casting
rough.
actual Irish people. Well, look,
But
none of them are Irish. Connie Nielsen, DeGray Scott, I think is Scottish. Connie
yeah,
Nielsen's German, I want to say.
yeah,
You know, they've been in big movies, those guys. So seeing them in this tiny indie horror movie, they really are trying to play these salt of the earth people.
sure.
But I agree with you. The accents are super Irish. They're really mega Irish.
I'm pretty excited. This
And
movie
it's
kinda
not
looks
bad or
interesting.
like they're doing a bad job. It feels a little artificial
Push.
somehow.
Sure.
Yeah, so.
All right. So our next film is another horror film called Mega Irish. No, I'm kidding. It's
That does sound scary.
that does sound scary. That's what I said when you said Mega Irish. I'm like, that would make a good horror film.
Mega.
We got to hurry.
Mega. Okay. Next up is The Lighthouse. Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe.
Yeah, directed by the cat who made The Witch
The
from a
Witch.
few years back. Hard to call The Lighthouse even a horror movie. The horror is all internalized. Hopefully, that not completely, but
I have not seen this. This has been high on my list. So again, keep any.
yeah, I won't go through the specifics. But it is what you think it is, though. It's a Academy ratio shot black and white film of Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe manning a lighthouse for 3 months, and it's creepy and atmospheric. And I don't think it's a total spoiler to say that the cabin fever and insanity that sets in because of that scenario and because of their personalities and because in a sort of very simple John Paul Sartre sort of way that these are the exact two wrong people to help each other through a tough situation. You know, the hell is other people, truly. That's what this film is about.
Yep.
It's super stylish. It's, you know, like I said, it's really long. It's black and white. It's art horror, and I love art horror. I loved The Witch, even though I didn't buy into all of it. I just give me. That's the kind of movie I really want to sit and watch. And so this is it's a step up in sophisticated storytelling. It's a highly rated film. I mean, if you read the bad reviews, no offense to you guys who didn't like it, it's okay to not like The Lighthouse, but if you read the bad reviews, they don't tend to be from the most well-articulated people. It's art horror.
Isn't that always the case?
Yeah.
No, it's not always the case. And I'll give you an example of a reviewer coming up here that I really disagreed with that wrote a really funny, scathing review of a film that is also art horror that I also loved. You know, sometimes you can be smart and hate stuff that's awesome. It's a bummer, but it's kind of fun too. I don't know. Lighthouse is if you like The Witch, no question, you've got to watch it. Michael's going to watch it. But
here's what I would say. One of my favorite things is in the description of our show, of the movie show with Joel and Ryan, we say it's, you know, back in pre-COVID times, it was just Joel and Ryan you review movies or talk about movies whilst sitting on a couch. And that was one of my favorite things. The tagline for, the little one sentence synopsis: 2 lighthouse keepers try to maintain their sanity whilst living on a remote industry. And I'm like, oh, I'm in on this movie because they use.
Thank you for the whilst.
Yeah,
we appreciate it.
It's
a whilst kind of movie.
Well,
and I'll say one last thing.
Lighthouse was up for a couple of Oscars, I believe, as well.
I believe you were right.
Dafoe and
nominated
Robert
for
Pattinson.
1 Oscar.
Cinematography.
And Robert Pattinson are world class. They are world class. They're not just acting their scenario honestly. They are people out of time. You believe that they're these guys from this other era that are these people who did this sort of work that we can't even really imagine.
Interesting.
It really does feel like you're looking in a spyglass back to some weird part of history that just because it's not our time and they're not our people are otherworldly. And the trick is to make that fascinating. And he does that. So that's a really good film. Really, really good.
All right, so our next film is it takes place a long time ago in a distant fairy tale countryside. and a young girl leads her little brother into a dark wood in desperate search of food and work, only to stumble upon a nexus of terrifying evil. This movie is, of course, Gretel and Hansel.
From the guy who brought you Blackcoat's Daughter, and he did another decent film before that. Blackcoat's Daughter was too much for me. Blackcoat's Daughter was mean to me, and it bitch slapped me, and I'm still sort of mad at it. I didn't enjoy it. I find it hard to endorse it, even though it's pretty good.
I forgot this is his film. I forgot.
So I didn't know what to think going into this. Again, art horror. I watched this, Lighthouse, and another movie shot in old TV Academy ratio on the same night. Just because I like the idea of watching all these people made this. The other one was and they all had pedigrees. The other one was The Nightingale by the woman who made The Babadook.
Oh, right.
Which is not really a horror movie. Maybe we'll talk about it someday. It was awesome. It has horrors in it, but it was a sort of historical epic. I watched them all on the same night. They were all really tricky and challenging and fun. It was my favorite night of my holiday viewing. I wish I'd have saved them all for later. Gretel and Hansel was maybe, it's in the top 3. It was maybe my favorite movie that I watched in this whole group.
Really?
And this is a movie that is hated online by people. They hate it. The funny review I was talking about was by a guy who's pretty smart, and the tag of his review was Hansel and Gretel bore a witch to death.
But the witch is
See, I mean,
trees,
right? I
right?
couldn't disagree more, but that's funny. And a good third to say 41% of our population are going to have that reaction to this. So it's not illegitimate. I loved it. Every shot is like a postcard. The lighting is amazing. They've changed the ages of Hansel and Gretel so that they're not partners. It really is an older sister taking care of what a lot of people will find to be an extremely annoying younger brother. But that's kind of what younger brothers are. That's not by accident. If annoying little boy performances get on your nerves, this one's gonna it's not the worst of them I've ever seen, but it's gonna get to you. So
more annoying than Stillwell in A League of Their Own.
You're gonna lose.
Okay,
no, because
good.
he's a very polite young British boy.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. There you go.
Who's still like, he has this sense of right and wrong and manners, but they're just concepts to him. He's not lived any sort of life. And the young teenager who's taking care of him, played by the young girl from It films, she's spectacularly good in this.
Oh, that's right. Sophia Lillis, right?
Yeah. They come across, as you know, you guys know the story, and this stays pretty close to the story. The what's different about it is the delivery. The delivery is so kind of amazing. And I love cinema, and this is pure cinema, this film. I adored it. The scenes, and it makes up the majority of the film, where Gretel interacts with the witch, played brilliantly by Alice Kriege.
Mm-hmm.
I just loved it. It's my favorite fairy tale
Interesting.
horror ever. It's I just thought it was the best.
Excellent.
There's no point in spoiling the rest of it. It goes the way you remember it going, but the deeper meanings, this idea that you have to break free from the anchor, the thing that you have to take care of, the responsibility to really be the person that you are, is a cruel idea that comes from a cruel place. But there's a lot of truth to it. And that's where the witch kind of is trying to seduce our hero. And it's particularly seductive in a real way, in a dreamlike way. The film comes at her in every way it can, because it's true. It's a true thing. And negotiating that, being yourself while taking care of your children, having your own life while being in a relationship. To me, it just all resonated completely wonderfully, and I loved it. Not to mention, it's just beautiful. It's just a beautiful movie. I was stunned by its beauty, honestly.
Well, very
Oz
cool.
is a good director. He really, I met him in a parking lot not long after I saw Black Coats, and I told him what I didn't like about it, but that I loved it mostly. which I don't know if he took that well or not, but
Who knows?
maybe I'll watch this.
He
and,
incorporated all those notes into Gretel and Hansel.
sure as heck did. Anyway.
All right. So next up is the movie that came without and gave without taking. It's Mandy.
That was the best intro ever. Ever. Let me talk about Mandy. I reviewed this.
Okay,
Sure,
so this is from 2018. This is our second Nicolas Cage film.
It is visually just crazy, insane fun. And I would have given it higher marks. I think I gave it a 4 out of 5, which is a really good score.
I agree.
Because it was so, and I'll use this term again, batshit crazy. But I was like, I need a story. I need a story.
Mm-hmm. All right, so here it is. The enchanted lives of a couple in a secluded forest are brutally shattered by a nightmarish hippie cult and their demon biker henchmen, propelling a man into a spiraling, surreal rampage of vengeance.
Nick is great in it. Andrea Riseborough is the woman.
Yep. Linus Roach is really good too.
Linus Roach is my muse when I'm writing. Linus would be the star of all of the scripts I've ever written.
He's awesome.
He is awesome, and it's because he can do anything. He can do anything, and in this, he's allowed to be. He's captivating in it. Panos Cosmatos, who's the son of the late great George P. Cosmatos.
Yep.
The Greek/Italian filmmaker of all kinds of big Hollywood
Leviathan.
things. Leviathan, which we'll talk about in a bit still, and Cobra and Tombstone, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
He made a film called what's it called? Beyond the Black Rainbow, which is it's exactly what Michael said. Hypnotizing, nightmarish, sort of brilliant in a way, but what is it? What is it? What is it? I really admire and enjoyed them both, but I'm with Michael. God, I gotta
give me something
with just a cursorily sort of attention to some kind of dramatic arc anywhere in here. Yes. You could have something that's truly off the charts brilliant.
Agreed.
It seems like you just defy the need to do that, and maybe Panos can't do it. Some people can't. It's okay. I'll watch his next movie, but
I'm for hire if he can have his beautiful weird visuals and I'll write a story that makes sense.
Mandy is nightmarish and horrible. It's hard to imagine many non-horror fans sitting down to watch that on Halloween and enjoying themselves. It's just it's impossible to imagine that for me.
The image that sticks with me, I don't want to spoil it, but there's a sequence. It's Linus Roach, and I think Nicolas Cage is sitting across from him, and they just have these close crops of their face back and forth, having this, I think, high, like, drug-induced conversation. And I remember watching that scene going, what in God's name? This is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And then I was like, what's going on?
Do you have it up on IMDb there, Joel? Mandy?
Yeah.
Please go into the soundtracks tab, please, and tell me the name of the song from it.
Soundtrack tab.
Linus Roach plays I don't think it's total spoiler to say plays a Charlie Manson like cult leader,
right?
Who also, like Manson, he's nothing like Manson really, but a little bit like him. He also, like Manson, had a failed recording career and took the criticisms of his music very personally and very seriously, and it's part of why he's here. There's a song in it, and they recorded the whole song. And
is it Amulet of the Weeping Maze?
Amulet of the Weeping Maze. It doesn't get more psychedelic and weird than that.
Yeah.
In this film,
lead vocals by Linus Roach.
Yeah, it's on YouTube. Go check out the whole song. I highly recommend that.
The movie is very recommend worthy. You gotta see it just because it's so weird.
Mm-hmm.
I just know a lot of the people who listen to us, and based on my interactions with them, they don't want to see this film. I just, if my warnings fail to stop you and you watch it anyway, hey, you're in for a trip. Truly, I liked it. It was
off the wall.
Ridiculously fun and an unforgettable journey into the heart of darkness. Bewitching, stunning, wonderful, an exhilarating ride through the fiery gates of hell.
Nobody some of that is right, but nobody is going to think this is fun. And if you do, you got problems. That's some horror writer who just watches people get murdered day in and day out and has lost his sort of sense of what is fun and what is not. This film This film is torture, but in a great way. Take that for what it's worth. But it is torture. Truly.
Let's move on to The Rental, starring Alison Brie, written and directed by Dave Franco.
I think I've seen the tag.
Two couples rent a vacation home for what should be a celebratory weekend getaway.
Also not fun. If you really like watching young, good-looking couples, dysfunctional couples, be passive-aggressive with them for an hour, and then when the psycho killer shows up, you still don't have fun. It's hard to say what your movie even is. Matthew? Who's the star of this thing?
It's Dan Stevens, Alison Brie,
and then two others.
Sheila Vand, Jeremy Allen White, Toby Huss.
Yeah, Toby obviously is a generation apart, but he's the guy renting them the house. I don't know what to say about that film. I struggled with it. It wasn't what it said it was, and then when it was like too late. There's something about the balance of it that was off, even though there's a moment in the middle of it which is straddling both worlds, the whiny millennials bitching with each other and the run for your life, where it was pretty good, where there was a dilemma at the heart of it, where they all had different semi-legitimate takes on it, but I don't know if I liked it or not. Hard to say. I'm reading through this cast list here, and I was going down, blah blah blah. There's only 5 people in the movie. Yeah. Anybody beyond that?
There's some background. There's someone credited. Here there's a character named Reggie, and apparently the actor playing Reggie, his name is Chunk.
Just bound to happen at some point.
Yep. So anyway, so if you're a big Chunk fan, or Chunk if you're listening yourself.
What's Chunk's real name? I can't remember. The cop calls him it a bunch of times.
I have no idea. You click on.
It's in the movie. Huh? Lawrence. Thank you. Lawrence. That's right.
Oh, yeah, Chunk. Yeah, sorry, that Chunk. Yeah. Lawrence. Yeah. So
what Chunk. What other Chunk would I be talking about?
Sorry, I wasn't hearing. I was looking in here and I'm like, wait, Chunk, what do you real name? I don't know what Chunk's real name is. I thought you were referring to what is the real name of the actor who now goes by
Jeff
Chunk.
Cohen. Yeah, I knew that off the top of my head. I just couldn't remember.
I met him at a deli in Beverly Hills.
He's a cool guy.
All right, gracious. So let's move on from Chunk and the Rental.
He's a lawyer now.
Yep.
Chunk and the Rental is is the name of my Echo and the Bunnymen cover band.
Chunk and the Rental.
Chunk and the Rentals.
So I hate to just diss on the Rental because it's accomplished and it's well done, but it's when you say what is it, it's very clear what it is, but it's equally frustrating what it is. So that to me that may not be everybody's take. I don't know.
All right. So next up is if you've been missing Finn Wolfhard on this list since It Chapter 2, he's back in The Turning. A young governess is hired by a man who has become responsible for his young nephew and niece after their parents' death. A modern take on Henry James's novella, The Turn of the Screw.
Isn't this Bly Manor?
It is. They're all based on The Turn of the Screw, as is The Innocents with Deborah Kerr from back in the 50s or whatever, 60s. That's probably the most adapted horror story of all time, I would guess. It seems like every 5 years or so somebody comes out with them. I can tell you this, watch all 10 episodes of Haunting a Bly Manor. I haven't even seen it yet, but I can promise you it will be less boring than the 90 minutes of The Turning. That movie is awful. It's
All right.
really bad. I like subtle horror, and I like ghosts, and I like jump scares. So I'm not being some snob about it. I like Finn Wolfhard and I like Mackenzie Davis a lot, which is why I showed up for it in the first place, thinking there'll be something here. Everybody seems to agree online that the ending is terrible, but hey, I've watched these where they have bad endings before. It doesn't make me hate them. I like them for what's there, what they do right. Nothing. It doesn't do anything right. It's awful. It shouldn't exist. It's not incompetently bad, but it's just good enough to get you to an extremely terrible, awful ending, and which is really just a stopping. We'll call it, if you know what that is. And I told you before, I don't mind ambiguity at all, but just stopping is just stopping. You just can't just stop. You have to do something. You know what I mean? I bought this thing. It's sitting over there. I only spent like $6 on it, but price of a couple tacos.
$6. Yeah.
But I should have bought the tacos because it's just terrible. It's not nourishing in any sort of way.
Oh my God, I love that so much. I am stealing that.
I'm sorry, put it on a t-shirt. I should have bought the tacos.
If we had merch for this show, that might be the first merch-worthy thing.
Yes.
That might be the first
that is
movie show with Joel and Ryan. I should have bought the tacos.
Should have bought the tacos.
That's canon now. That's canon now for our show. If we don't like something, Ryan, you're just gonna say, I should have bought the tacos.
You're listening to me do this whole list. I'm very forgiving of these things. Even the rental, like I'm glad I watched that. It was different, even though it didn't connect with me. This is just bad. It's just poorly done, and it's not even terribly bad. We're like, whoa, what am I watching? It's just bad. It's just bland, and it looks like, hey, what they're selling is classy horror in an English manner with some decent actors, and some ooga boogas. It could be worse than that, but
yeah,
I don't think there's anything on this list that's worse than this.
That goes down. No, not on the list.
It shouldn't
tacos first.
You who watches a connoisseur of horror would be insulted by the plain, bland. They didn't even know what they were doing when they started offness of this film.
Wow.
Oh, so basically they shot the first draft of their script?
Well, there's an alternate ending, which I watched, and it's better by like a jillion times while still being bad.
Wow.
So that gives you an idea. Like they had a plan, and they should have just stuck with it, even though audiences didn't like it or whatever. Instead, they just like, well, we could just do this and then show that part again and then stop. And because they'd rather audience go, huh? Then what the hell? Blah, 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 blah. And they got Instead, they got both. Good job. 2 negative reactions for the price of not having an ending. And again, endings. I really typically like ambiguity. That is not what we're talking about here.
All right. Well, we'll always be able to thank The Turning for giving us what will become, I promise you, the catchphrase for our show. All right. Next up, we've talked about horror movies and war before. Like the war genre. Military movies and horror. Next up is Ghosts of War.
Ghosts of War. It's a favorite combo of mine, actually.
I
really enjoy war/horror films for the most part.
Yeah,
I like Overlord. I like Death Watch. I like The Bunker.
Of course, The Keep.
The Keep.
Yep. 5 American soldiers
assigned. Without question, Michael will tell you he's one of the 3 people in the whole world who's read it. I wrote a horror war movie.
Yep. 5 American soldiers assigned to hold a French chateau near the end of World War II. This unexpected respite quickly descends into madness when they encounter a supernatural enemy more terrifying than anything seen on the battlefield.
It sounds like The Keep.
Yeah, that's why I watched it. I should have known better, because The Keep isn't even a good movie, but at least The Keep is what it is. Its artistic convictions are on display all the time. This movie, is streaming only. I guess there's a DVD out of it now. I watched it on a streaming service. It just, I didn't like it. Sorry.
couldn't be saved by Skylar Astin and could not be saved by Billy Zane.
Yeah, and Billy Zane, frankly, he produced it. His existence in it is a spoiler alert in and of itself. But he's not terrible in it. None of those young men are, but there's a modern take on horror, like that every small unit in a horror movie is like a anti-establishment Vietnam group of people, and these guys are sort of bickering, don't really care which Germans they torture and kill, and they're not set up as bad guys. There's just this cliche that hangs over them from the start that doesn't really work. I would have liked, and I shouldn't review what's not there. I always say we shouldn't do that, and we shouldn't, but I just would have liked something where we could get to know these guys over the course of the story instead of being shown established sort of stereotypes and cliches from the get-go.
What trope does this guy fill? And this is what this trope,
Yeah, unfortunately, that's what it is. And then the movie challenges those tropes. So it's not like it's poorly done or not thought out. It's not it's not just a piece of trash like The Turning, but I wanted it to be really good. I read mostly bad reviews of it, but I read enough good ones by people I thought were smart that I thought, hey, this might be something, and it's not that great. It's hard to recommend.
So, hey, guys.
It's high concept. It's Twilight Zone City. It's a lot like In the Tall Grass. It's not playing fair with you.
Nice.
Just to give you just one hint, because I was super frustrated by this throughout, and apparently in the end I shouldn't have been. There are tons of 1943 anachronisms spread throughout the beginning of the movie, and they're not an accident. So don't be like, that song came out in 1955. Hey, that thing is this, the blah, blah, blah. That movie was not during World War II. That's what I was doing the whole time. I was like, what?
Huh?
What are you even, you don't know what you're doing. Well, it turns out these guys do know what they're doing. It just didn't have the effect on me as a single audience person as it was meant to, I guess.
Right. All right. So, hey guys,
but they didn't know what they were doing. Hey. Maybe next time, gang.
Guys, what's the deepest point? What's the deepest point in the ocean?
The Mariana
Trench.
Yeah. So if you're digging down there, and if you're a mining company down there, and there's a mysterious earthquake, I mean, it's going to cause some havoc. Havoc will ensue. So when a crew of oceanic,
like havoc, if I dare say,
a crew of oceanic researchers working for a deep sea drilling company try to get to safety after a mysterious earthquake devastates their deep water research and drilling facility located on the bottom of Marianas Trench.
Have we heard this
underwater?
Before, Michael?
Well, I've wanted to see this, and I don't know what's kept me, because I love this.
Tacos.
It's not good, and it's just a carbon copy remake of a bunch of other movies that we love that are also, frankly, not good. This movie is fun. Unlike Mandy, which is not fun, it is torture and is terrible, and you will feel like you need a shower afterwards. Yeah. This movie, maybe that's your bag. I don't know. I kind of enjoyed it. Say what you want about me. This movie's fun. This is B-movie, monster, underwater, high budget, fun. It throws you right, and it doesn't even spend 10 minutes getting to know people. It throws you right into the mess right from the get-go. It's long corridors with lots of electronics and doors that won't open, and spacesuits underwater, and monsters that you don't understand what they are, and you can only hear them. It's got a brilliant sound design and a pretty decent score. It's got super annoying TJ Miller in it. He's so annoying, but he's still slightly less annoying than Daniel Stern is in Leviathan. So he's a trope. He's in this kind of movie. He's almost there to remind you what kind of movie it is, because it's good enough that you almost think it might be really great. It isn't, but it's fun, man. If you like underwater monster movies, or just monster movies of any kind.
Kristen Stewart?
She's great, but I love Kristen Stewart, so I'm the wrong one to ask. If you hate her, you'll probably hate her in this, because she plays this sort of butch, badass, philosophical, bad girl in it. People aren't gonna like that. But I thought she was. I always think she's good, and I thought she was fine in this.
This is already on my list. It's like there's several on here that I'm like, I've been wanting to, and I haven't. So
no
there you go.
reason not to watch.
This one
There's
you're
no
gonna have
reason for
fun.
any of you not to watch Underwater, except for the fact that Fox made it years ago and has held off from releasing it because it's a big expensive movie that has no audience and that nobody's demanding, and it just had no place. Disney finally put it out in January or whatever, unceremoniously, because they're clearing the decks of crap that Fox didn't know what to do with.
Right.
One of the last times you'll ever hear the Fox logo in all its widescreen glory at the beginning of the movie, which I was waxing nostalgic about.
Yeah.
All right. So up next, sadly, our list does not contain a movie called called Earth, because after Underwater we have The Wind. I guess we could have had Fire too if we needed Fire.
More low budget indie horror for me. This is sort of my favorite genre when I dive into this sort of stuff.
A plainswoman. A plainswoman faces the harshness and isolation of the untamed land in the western frontier of the late 1800s.
It's again 2 cabins, 2 couples, isolated in the middle of the plains. Husbands that treat them like possessions who are there to cook for them and stuff. It's very old school in that way. It's a lot like the Lighthouse in that way. What was that? Did I actually see that? Or is this person going insane? Like me as an audience guy, am I to trust her or not? You don't really know. It's pretty well done.
Swank?
No, it's nobody like that.
No, there's the two women in it. Caitlin Gerard, Julia Goldani Tellez,
and Julia Tellez, she's a special actor.
Julia Goldani, she's from The Affair, right?
Correct. She's great in it.
Yeah.
Oh, that gives me, because she's a fantastic.
Here's what I would also say about it. This movie written by a woman, directed by a woman. So this is,
really appreciated that.
We're getting that female take on terror, female take on horror. That there's obviously going to be something interesting.
Low budget indie Western horror hybrid. That won't be for everybody. Some people are going to be bored with this. This is not it doesn't provide you easy answers. It doesn't. It doesn't have a traditional Hollywood climax. It just doesn't have any of that stuff. But I found it above average for this sort of thing. I enjoyed it a lot. And a lot of it, what really was, it was the woman's perspective, and it's the 2 female characters. The boys are good in it, but they are really there to be stolid and strong, but not the least bit helpful, which is exactly what they are. And it's the women that carry the day, and they do a really great job. So.
All right, so after the water comes the wind, and we're going back to the water with Blackwater Abyss.
Yes, by the people who made The Reef, one of Michael's favorite survival films, and a sequel to the very well-regarded Blackwater, which was 2 women in a swamp trapped in a tree with a crocodile attacking them. These are all Australian movies. And
we got another crack. We got another crocodile.
Cave. We got another group of
cave
people
system in northern Australia, and they're trapped, or they're exploring, and they find themselves threatened by a hungry crocodile. It's good that we make sure that we note that the crocodile is hungry instead of a malevolent crocodile.
Exactly.
An irritable crocodile.
Let's get to that.
Okay.
The best movie I ever saw was a crocodile who wasn't hungry. He just was malevolent. He was territorial, and he was going bonkers because these people who were trapped in his territory wouldn't leave. And from the crocodile's perspective, that's Sam Worthington says, he's got to feel like we're moving in or something. So a malevolent crocodile is scarier than a hungry crocodile, just for the record. That film is called Rogue. If you watch one crocodile movie your whole life, watch that one. Also Australian, because crocodile.
So is this the same filmmakers then as The Reef and the first? It is. Okay.
It's a mix. It's the same people who wrote the Blackwater, which was good, and the same people who made The Reef, directed The Reef, which was good. This isn't very good, unfortunately.
All right, so
the end.
I'm going to read this is a review on IMDb, and this is the entirety of the review.
Credit the reviewer.
Yep. It is reviewed by someone named Metalbeard.
Thanks, Metalbeard.
Yep. And
Welcome
it just
to
says,
the movie show with Joel and Ryan.
Yep, Metalbeard, thank you for your contribution. And it just, here's the review. Victor, Jen, Victor, Victor, Jen, Victor. If you've read the title of this review, you've seen the movie. Forget about seeing any actual crocodile. And I'm just like, I love that review. Victor, Jen,
Victor. There are worse people trapped in a boring cave with a hungry crocodile films. I know there are. It's not a terrible monster movie. It's not like a sci-fi movie that's just is deliberately bad. It's trying to give these characters, interpersonal issues, but watch The Reef. I mean, what are they? Are they arguing about their relationship problems when their shark is hunting them? They're not. What? Because you wouldn't be. Because who gives a shit at that point? And that's important. This movie is wrong-headed in that way. The movie is all about the dynamics between this group of people and how all of that comes out by them being attacked by a crocodile, and that just flat out doesn't work. It's still okay. The croc looks okay. It just, I wouldn't recommend it. It's nowhere near as good as Blackwater, even though it was clearly more expensive. It's nowhere near as good as any of the Trapped in the Cave movies we've talked about, even The Cave. It's nowhere it doesn't even approach the actual brutal survival simplicity of The Reef. So it's just not worth your time.
Let me just say, I mean, I'm going to watch this because I did love the first one. And of course, like you said, The Reef is mind-blowingly terrifying. So I'll probably give this a shot. So
there you go.
It's on the mid-level.
All right.
What's nice about our next film is the title of it is also a lesson.
Let me tell you, Michael, you won't be watching their next movie after you watch Black Widow.
Got it.
Okay.
So whatever clout is driving you to feeling you have to watch this, this movie will kill it.
Got it.
Spoiler alert.
Copy that.
Our next movie is called Tigers Are Not Afraid. Wow. And this movie's from a couple years ago, 2017. It's a dark fairy tale about a gang of 5 children trying to survive the horrific violence of the cartels and the ghosts created every day by the drug war.
Spanish language film, just for those of you who aren't into that, or for those of you who super are, then this one you should be running to full steam. I just question the marriage of the horror of orphan, impoverished children mixed with fairy tale horror images. Like, those things never sat comfortably in this film for me. That concern of mine aside, I was riveted. It was one of the few films on this list where I was just the whole time like couldn't look away from any of it because it was real world horror. I think I don't want to spoil individual reactions to it if you watch it, but I think the fairy tale / horror ghost whatever elements to it were believe a coping mechanism by the characters involved. I think that's pretty clear and not a spoiler, but I'm not even 100% sure of that. So I don't really know. The little kids in it they're not like us, and they don't think and act like us. And so when you talk about impenetrable leading characters, they're hard to get a grip on and understand where they're coming from because the way they cope with these things is so unique. But it really well shot, really moody, really fantastic sense of place and time. Really great, really landed hard every time it had to, and it had to a few times. The senselessness of drug violence, just the utter pointlessness of it. But it's a film that has the potential to really gut you because it's when it's over and you've given some sense of justice. It's
I did review this a couple of years ago when it was at Scream Fest. It premiered there, and I met Issa, the filmmaker, and she's working closely with Del Toro now on projects. So I think they're working on a.
Del Toro was flabbergasted by the Tigers. And
this movie, I did give a perfect score because I just walked away going, "What?" It's
It's like nothing you've ever seen
No,
before.
and
No question.
I think it was terrifying, but it was also, I mean, I think there were many times that I broke down because there specifically one particular character, and then they kind of little shout out to AI, artificial intelligence kind of thing. But I was really impressed with this movie. I wrote the review. It was one of those ones I came home and immediately just let it get it out there, you know. And so I posted it immediately. And so that's actually the next day when I met Issa when I went back to the festival. But yeah, it's a hard movie, but like you said, but visually just stunning. And I mean, I think she spent $2 on this. You know, it's like the fact
No,
that
but she's was there and she knows what to
yeah.
show us all at all times. That's the sign of a great visual
But
storyteller. And
it's not an easy movie. It is really hard to sit through just because of the subject matter, and since these are children, you know, and wow, yeah, I
we've seen
forgot this was on the
children
list today.
a lot more than normal sacrificed these past couple of years to popcorn horror, whatever.
Yeah.
But this is different. This is a horrific world, but it's told from a childish place,
Yes.
and that's the magic of it. So
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty
Really,
amazing.
really good movie. But yeah, bring your tissues.
Well, there you go. Next up, I think we have another foreign language film.
One more, yeah.
Yeah, from
Sputnik.
Estonia. Yeah, this movie it's called Sputnik. That's from 2020 here.
Oh, okay.
The lone survivor of an enigmatic spaceship incident hasn't returned back home alone. Hiding inside his body is a dangerous creature.
Spoiler alert for Sputnik.
Well, I mean, the poster itself
sort
sort of gives that away.
Yeah, the poster shows there's something inside. Although it could be, the poster implies it's some sort of alien from Alien, and it isn't. It's a symbiote.
Sure.
And that's sort of what the movie's about: duality. And it's a science fiction. It has its horrific stuff in it, no question. But it's a science fiction movie because it concentrates not on the horror chases and spills as the ideas behind what this thing is, and how it takes a thinking person, a doctor, to figure it out. It's good. I mean, it's a good, as far as that goes, in a scientific bunker in Kazakhstan, with a bunch of scientists who all have their own agendas with the government that isn't cooperating, all that stuff. It's got all that sort of paranoia and all those pressures on all these people, plus a really interesting performance from a guy who is possessed by this otherworldly thing. So I dug it. It's not as good as Tigers, which was just knocked your socks off. This is all stuff you've sort of seen before, just done in a pretty smart way.
Mm-hmm.
So if you like sci-fi and you're willing to deal with some Russian to watch a sci-fi movie, you should watch this. It's really well made and well acted and stuff, but it's a serious movie. There's not a lot of jokes. It's very Russian. It's very drenched in vodka and like self-seriousness. It's like an old, it's like an old Russian novel in that way. Or if you've ever seen the movie Stalker, you probably haven't, but also just very, very Russian. The original Solaris, you get the idea.
Well, just a really quick side note I wanted to ask you guys, because do you find yourself accepting of things that are derivative, but that they're done so well?
You bet.
That you're like, you know what, I'll let that go, that I've seen this before.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even have to be done that well, like Underwater, and I will accept you. I'll even embrace you.
Okay.
Whatever that magic is that connects with you. When I was watching Underwater, it was like watching. It was like being back in 1989 again.
Yeah.
Truly,
yeah.
It was just wonderful. It's and that works on all of us, depending on our generation,
Sure.
depending on if we liked those stupid movies back then or not.
Yeah, it's that idea that there are a finite number of stories that a person could tell. It's just the delivery system with which you tell them.
Agreed.
So it's sort of like that. It's like, if I've seen this story before, but if you're pulling me in and telling,
you're doing something,
bringing me along in an interesting way or something.
I allow for the idea that somebody can tell a new story. Please do.
Yeah.
I'm always
oh my
wowed
goodness.
when I see one. But I agree to an extent that largely, and especially on this level, once 200 people, 1,000 people, 3,000 people are involved in the making of your film, you really are going to watch something that's somewhat derivative. Because on that scale, you have to. That's why I flock to these indie horror movies, because I think your chance of seeing something new goes way up. But really, even those are the same old thing, just told in a very story-oriented way, because the story and the character is all you have when you've only got a couple $1,000,000 to make a movie.
Sure.
So even those flop sometimes, but that's the kind of thing I enjoy. So
cool.
All right, next film is from 2017. It is Voice from the Stone. Set in the 50s, it's the haunting and suspenseful story of a solemn nurse drawn to aid a young boy who has fallen silent since the sudden passing of his mother.
This is also, it's something different. It was based on a novel, and the novel's pedigree is, along with this movie, it elevated the movie quite a bit. But it's just a turn of the screw type tale. The young nurse visiting the young boy, trying to help him, and something else seems to be going on here. I mean, that's as old as the hills, truly. Voice from the Stone, I was enchanted with. I just want to give a warning. It's not a horror movie either. It's a gothic romance. And it's hard to even really consider it gothic, because it takes place in the summer in Tuscany, which is not a gothic feeling place. It's very warm and beautiful, and like one of the most beautiful places in Europe. So
it's a drama mystery thriller, according to IMDb. So
it's somebody who likes romances that are off kilter. You know, Emilia Clarke,
Driller Street,
is the young nurse. The the widower who runs the household, is an actor I just love from Australia. What's his name?
Martin
Tsakis. Martin Tsakis.
Tsakis. I was going to say
Tsakis.
Yeah.
He's fantastic in it. The two of them, the little boy is in it too, but it's this 4 people. Then there's a caretaker / hunter, fixer-upper guy who helps with the estate, and that's it. It's great. A lot of people who watched it were like, oh, Emilia Clarke's a bad actor. I couldn't disagree with that more. We talked about it in our Game of Thrones special. What's so great about her as an actor is she recognizes when her character is this demon from hell unleashed on the people around her, and when she's just some dumb teenage girl trying to be threatening and trying to get what she wants. That character is both. That we learn ultimately that's the danger of the character. And she does both, but people see an annoying teenager and they just think, oh, you're an annoying teenager. And you need to look a little deeper than that. This is she's brilliant in this. She's a really labored performance. Her actions are not entirely admirable, which is really, really tough, because she starts to get her own agenda and throughout the story, and is seduced by Tuscany, by this rich house, by this lonely guy who she's attracted to, by this boy that she wants to help, and all of her nurturing thing. And it's a really good movie. This movie I wasn't expecting to be good. I bought into it because of the turning, because I liked the 2 actors. I went to it for all the same reasons, and it wasn't even really scary. Although I'm telling you, if you really think through what you saw when it's over, think the whole thing through, it's one of those that gets under your skin. The idea of it is way creepier than anything you're necessarily shown over the course of the film. The Voice from the Stone. Not bad.
Excellent. Next up, I apologize to you, dear listener, for bringing this up. I mean, we were talking about a malevolent crocodile earlier, and I didn't realize that we were coming up on a movie called Malevolent. So I don't want you to hear this and think that it's another crocodile movie.
We're running out of time, and we got some big ones, so we're going to do these lightning style. You've not seen Malevolent, right, Michael? No. Malevolent, I watched Malevolent because Malevolent is an extremely poorly reviewed film on Netflix also, and I watched it purely because Florence Pugh's in it and she's awesome.
Yeah.
That's the only reason I watched it. The only reason I watched Ouija was because Olivia Cooke was in it, and because I heard that the prequel was awesome. So I watched a movie knowingly that I wasn't going to like. And again, I was surprised by Malevolent, and I was surprised by the lack of sophistication of the reviews I was looking at. Granted, they were just Netflix reviews or what, you know, they weren't professional reviewers, but still, I wanted to know what audiences thought. Audiences seem to miss the whole point of Malevolent. Malevolent's a pretty good, spooky, again, indie horror film. You've seen it all before, kind of.
Yep. A team of scam artists get more than they bargained for when a job at a haunted country estate gets out of hand.
But ask yourself,
yeah.
Malevolent, where's the malevolence in this story? Start thinking about it a little bit. It provides you with some things to think about. Florence Pugh is great. She's great in it. A lesser actor might not have been as good, but she hardly is the reason for showing up. It's not a brilliant performance or anything. She's a cocky teenager who's been making movies about walking through fake haunted houses, and you know what I mean? She gets her head when she runs into an actual scary thing, but
sure.
It's not that great. It's so much better than it's cracked up to be. The people who hate on it, I don't think gave it an ounce of thought. I actually think when you think about it, it's actually a pretty neat idea.
All right. Very
Outside
cool.
of the cocky teenagers get what they deserve when they find an actual, you know, there's more to it than that. If there wasn't, I don't think I would have liked it very much either.
Okay. All right. So next, we're going to take a trip back to 1968, where Stella and her two friends meet a mysterious drifter, Ramon, and uncover a sinister notebook of stories, and those stories become scary stories to tell in the dark.
Again, big movies coming, so we got to keep this kind of brief, but scary stories to tell in the dark, and I'll let Michael take over. It's fresh in his mind. I just watched this 3 nights ago, too, so it's fresh in mine. The kids in a horror scenario, 1968 comes off pretty good in it, I have to say. It's got sort of CG masked monsters in it. It's got all the things that those kids-based horror films has, but it's nothing like them. This movie really did something different with that genre. I didn't love it, but I was impressed. I was impressed that the curses and that the things, because you think it's going to be kind of just a silly anthology movie, and it's more than that. Ends up being a lot at stake in it for these kids. It is not a harmless film for the characters involved at all, or the audience members. You can be traumatized by some of the stuff in it, but I liked it because it wasn't a jump scare, like let's have fun at the movies thing. The dread and the seriousness of it built and built and built throughout the film. They made a really very scary movie. Again, scarier maybe when you think about it than when you're watching it, but plenty of scary stuff throughout too. Michael, what did you think?
I thought the production values, performance, everything kind of technical was good, but it did nothing for me, really.
You didn't get into it?
I had a couple of good scenes. The problem is that, Avradal, the director, he did a movie called Autopsy of Jane Doe a couple of years ago, which is actually very frightening. So, I mean, obviously you're taking a source material that's children's books, so obviously it's tamed, but
it's tame.
It's entertained, but I'm like, whatever.
It's inoculation into horror for young people. But it's not the typical R.L. Stine sort of that. It is that, frankly, but whatever the veneer is that makes that harmless and easy to watch after school with your friends, that's not here. That's been taken from this. But it is still that kind of story. It's a kids' horror movie for kids, for tweens.
It's that kids on bikes subgenre in horror.
Right.
And I'm just like, this has been done before, and it's been done better. It is a good example.
That's true. Can't deny that.
It was just I was entertained reasonably, but at the end, I don't care.
Well, there you go. All right. Up next, we go back to the Old West. After a train robbery goes bad, two brothers leading a gang of cowboys must survive the night in a ghost town inhabited by a coven of witches. The Pale Door.
Sounds pretty cool, huh?
Yeah.
It's bad. Don't see it. Moving on.
Ooh, should have gotten the tacos.
Hey, it's a neat idea, and the film is trying. Stan Shaw is in it, and a couple of cool actors that I like. And the film's trying to have meaning in it, but it
sure.
The witches aren't. It starts out as a brothel, so at best, this is a tamer version, a less funny version of From Dusk Till Dawn. Okay. And it's not even as good as and I don't like From Dusk Till Dawn, but it's not even as good as that, because at least that movie is balls to the walls, committed to what it's doing. This film isn't. It doesn't have the budget to be like that. It can't have constant makeup effects. The burnt witches are kind of reasonably scary, and it's a siege movie, Michael. Maybe I'm being unfair to it.
Yay, okay.
But I wanted to like The Pale Door, and I didn't like it very much. So.
All right. Next up, one of my favorite names to say, and she's quite a good actress, Imogen Poots, stars in Vivarium. A young couple looking for the perfect home find themselves trapped in a mysterious labyrinth-like neighborhood of identical houses. I feel this way every time I watch House Hunters sometimes.
Well, that's the fear, right? The fear is that you went to Egan to buy some baseball card, and now you're trapped there and you can't get out.
Right.
As a Minneapolis reference. It's identical suburban nightmare stuff. Jesse Eisenberg and Imogen Poots, pretty good actors. This is an extended Twilight Zone episode more than a horror movie, but it couldn't be a Twilight Zone episode because they're really dark and gross. What is it? Cronenberg body horror elements to this tale, and I was impressed. I was impressed with it more than I enjoyed it. I'll just say that. The style of it, the idea behind it, it gets to you a little bit, but it's a wholly unpleasant experience by design.
I don't care for Eisenberg as an actor, so that knocks this off.
Well, there you go. Now this thing does have comedy.
He plays it straight and tries to do a decent job. It's got one of the creepier little boys of all time in it, but it doesn't amount to much ultimately. But it is, I don't know, it does give you stuff to talk about. It's it's in the middle of the pack.
It does also say comedy horror mystery in it, so it sounds like there's at least an attempt to be funny.
Sure, but don't believe this is a comedy, for the love of God. Do not go into this thinking you're going to be laughing.
This is literally the first word it says, comedy horror mystery. Or comedy horror mystery. So, all right, get some tacos.
High concept. There are some funny things in it, but no.
Okay, so it's a conception. So maybe that's where they're getting that. All right, so next up.
Even the film starts out, just to give you an idea, and we need to not talk about Vivarium, but the film starts out with a little girl looking at a bunch of dead birds at the bottom of a tree and saying, some other bird stole their nest and killed these baby birds. And she's like, why does that happen? And the teacher's all like, well, it's the world's just like that, kind of. And she's trying to explain it to her by being nice, but the harsh reality is bigger birds wanted a nest, too lazy to build one on their own, happy to kill these children just to get what they want.
Interesting.
And that little scene, because it's a smart film, it's not a badly made film, sums up what you're in for as you go.
Okay.
Well, there you go.
Line. And laughs isn't part of it, the equation at all.
Okay. Well, that's important to note, because I mean, it said it's one of the few that I've seen the word comedy even listed amongst their genre things. So that's why I mentioned it. All right, next up is Relic. We get return of Emily Mortimer to our list.
Again, no time to talk about the Relic, but I like the Relic. The Relic is about three generations of women. Emily Mortimer, again, she's a really, really good actor. The Bella Heathcote plays her daughter, and her mother is played by Australian actor.
Robin Nevin.
Robin Nevins, who was in, I believe she was in the all these movies made in Australia and that need an old woman. She was in Matrix film. She was in Mad Max. She was the old, lovable old lady in Mad Max Fury Road. She is things
about Relic.
She's a mom who is senile, and her senility is taking over her world, and it's real. It's manifesting itself in the real world, and that's scary because senility and there's a better word for senility that fits better. Dementia. I don't know, but
sure.
Old lady dementia. Essentially, this movie is that, and it's about a daughter and another daughter trying to figure it out, or not figuring it out until it's too late. So there's it's metaphorically rich, which I always really enjoy, plus genuinely unsettling. Again, indie, takes place in a house, indie Australian horror film. Good though, really, really, really good.
All right, so this next film, also known as Tatterdemalion, it's called, and it goes by Lost Child. An
Lost
Army
Child.
veteran.
Yeah, go ahead.
Army veteran who returns home to the Ozarks finds an abandoned young boy in the woods, and as she searches for clues to the boy's identity, discovers the local folklore about a spirit which comes in the form of a child.
Yeah, veteran from one of our wars that we're still fighting for some reason, comes home to the Appalachian Mountains to find, basically to get drunk and just put the past behind her. But she eventually finds herself needing to find meaning in her life, finds a little boy. The boy has some local folklore. He's wrapped up in that, but there's nothing. Lost Boy and the artwork really does suggest a horror movie, and there's just not a horror movie here at all. That's the letdown of it. It's a decent drama with some legend stuff interwoven through it that does have, that is legit, so it's not, but it's not a horror movie. It's
sure.
It isn't. So beware of Lost Child on Amazon Prime.
All right. Something we haven't been able to say much about Helen Hunt lately is the title of this next movie, I See You.
Out of time. I'm totally out of time, so I can't be dealing with these streaming movies, but I See You is different, Michael. It's 3 different movies that you've seen before, taking place at the same time and being revealed to you slowly that they're all part of the same story. It's not a genius film. It's very simple and subtle. If it were going to be a big Hollywood hit or whatever, they probably wouldn't have Helen Hunt and John Tenney in it, but they're both great in it. And they've both been really, really good in things. Helen Hunt was a legitimate movie star when she was in her mid-40s, that never happens to anybody, especially women. So I'm kind of stunned by that. And always amazed by her. She's good in it. They're good. It's a family dealing with family stuff, and stuff starts to go weird. And why is it going weird? The reason, even if you end up hating it, I'm telling you, the reason will surprise you. And
interesting.
Payoffs are the payoffs, because it surprises you, continue all the way to the end of the movie. So I was taken with it. Not bad.
All right.
I See You.
A boy receiving treatment for his autoimmune disorder discovers that the house he's living in isn't as safe as he thought. The movie is Eli.
Eli, a haunted sanitarium film. Who doesn't like that?
Oh, sure. There you go.
Little boy in danger. The parents are played by really good actors, Kelly Riley and what's the guy's name? Do you have it?
I do. I was bringing up my next.
And Lily
film.
Taylor as an evil nurse, or is she, or an evil scientist?
Yeah, Max Martini.
Max Martini. He's a decent actor. They make a decent couple trying to help their little boy. It's not that great a film, but it does have a De Palma-esque worthy finale that I was sort of impressed with, so I'm glad I watched it.
Well, very cool. All right, up next is the remake, once again, another remake of The Invisible Man, this one with Elizabeth Moss.
Boy, The Invisible Man, sorry for my phone. The Invisible Man, I read Michael's, he wasn't really a review, it was his Facebook reaction to it, which I read them all, Michael, every time. He was pretty hard on this movie, and I was like, whatever. So I tune in, I watch it. The first half of it is as good an Invisible Man story ever. And I just want to say the thing that's great about it before we move on to everything else. The thing that's great about this version of The Invisible Man is there's very little Invisible Man vision, like Invisible Man point of view shots. I don't want to say there's none, but there's almost none, which is amazing, because usually these movies, that's all they are. Your characters are being stalked by some invisible man, and we're to be having this fantasy that we are the Invisible Man. It's a male fantasy. That's how it's always been played. And this movie is those long corridors where something's moving, or is it? It's not. Is it? The movie literally shows us nothing and makes us think we're seeing something at times. The point of view is so important. Elizabeth Moss is a really, really good actor who carries the movie as much as she can. At a certain point, nobody can. But she really does, especially in the early goings. And it just felt like it was going to be the best Invisible Man ever. An Invisible Man for a more feminist, reality, the real story of the ugliness of a obsessed man stalking a woman who has this ultimate power. Like, I really, really liked it. And then it just as quick as it is awesome. It's made by Lee Wannell, who's little more than Jump Scare Junior, or James Wan, I guess would be Jump Scare Senior. He's made movies that I liked before, but and this might be the best movie he can make, but it just, the whole second half of it, it's not all garbage, but he just goes sort of big budget action movie with it when it's the last thing we need, and none of it pays off, and the body count goes way up, and yet none of the people are people we know. Matter of fact, I'll just tell you, it's 18 of them are prison guards that we've never met.
Yeah.
It goes gangbusters, chaos, wildness, big finale in it. It doesn't pay off, and its quirky twists at the end don't really pay off. So
I was just kind of shocked by the overwhelmingly positive reviews, and so I went in like, oh, this should be good, and I'm like, nope.
It's good for a while. Would you at least not agree with that? I mean,
I made it through. I mean, it never connected. I mean, I thought some of the effects, and then watching behind the scenes effects of how they shot it with the green guy in the green suit and everything, that was cool, and I appreciate the technical side of it, but there was no connection for me on this at all. I'm just like,
I liked the very much a take on what's the Julia Roberts movie from the 90s?
Sleeping with the Enemy.
It's the opening is really all that. Her escape. We've not seen the abusive relationship up to this point. We don't need to. As soon as we see what's happening, we know what's happening. And we know we're watching an Invisible Man movie, so we get the gist of it. But
I didn't.
And then as she slowly realizes what's happening and becomes to believe it, and nobody else believes it, that's all old hat. But I thought it was as well done in this film as ever. When it breaks through that and becomes its own thing, it's what it is bad, boring, dumb, uninvolving.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. You know what though? You should have left. That's the next movie. You should have left.
Yeah, Kevin Bacon and Amanda Seyfried play a couple.
That's weird.
They don't.
What? Huh?
They don't. They play up that idea, the age difference there.
Oh, okay. A former banker, his actress wife, and their spirited daughter book a vacation at an isolated modern home in a Welsh countryside where nothing is quite as it's.
The house finds you. A decent spin on the haunted house thing. Kevin Bacon is a good actor. He replaced Nick Cage, which that doesn't normally happen. It's usually the opposite thing that happens. And even now, he's good in it, and they it's an interesting idea. It's David Koepp written and directed though.
Okay.
And so it has all of David's weaknesses on full display in it, even though his strengths are there too. He's a guy that I never really can embrace and sometimes really resent.
All right. So it sounds like another haunted housey type film. The Lodge, a soon-to-be stepmom, is snowed in with her fiance's 2 children at a remote holiday village. Just as relations begin to thaw between the trio, some strange and frightening events take place.
I love The Lodge.
Really?
Top marks.
Well, there
top
you go.
Marks from me. The scenario in that is something we haven't seen before. It feels familiar, and then when we find out what it is, it isn't. And once we find out what's going on, there's no hope in sight for anybody. And that feeling of you can't stop this, you cannot stop this train from rolling it's a great trapped. I mean, it's a terrible thing to feel, but it's why we watch these movies in the first place, to experience that. But we get to make pizza rolls afterwards. Like, we get to go on.
We get to get the tacos.
The people in the lodge.
I've heard good things about this, but I've also not yet seen it.
This is a film that is extremely divisive. Michael, you have to see it. You just have to. I demand that you see it. I command you to see it.
Riley,
you have to, because your take on it, good or bad, is we need that in the world. The plenty of good reviewers and decent people didn't like it. I get why. I'm not gonna. You can tell this is how I get when I really like something. Flat out, do not want to spoil even a second of it.
Okay.
To talk about what it is or to read about what it is ahead of time would you be doing yourself a disservice.
You know what? You know what? Let's just tell the audience.
Dive right in.
Skip the tacos. Go right to the lodge.
It's horror and it's horrific. And I said the same thing about Hereditary, which Michael had problems with, but which you also sort of admired.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't quite as just batshit cruel as Hereditary is, but it is similar. It had a similar effect on me internally watching it.
Interesting. Okay.
All right. Well, we like Florence.
Again, the actor here is what's the actress's name?
Riley. Is it Riley Keough? Keough, yeah.
Holy Moses!
I know the name.
Well, there you go.
Okay.
All right, go. Here we go. We like Florence.
I'll tell you here. One last thing. Sorry about there. There's one thing I can spoil. There's a moment at their mother's funeral. These two kids who basically are the stars of the film. Their mother's played by Alicia Silverstone. In a really great short role. I've sort of spoiled what happens to her, but they're at her funeral, and the daughter who has a doll that she really loves they're letting balloons go, black balloons, into the sky as some sort of cathartic moment at the end of this funeral, and they're all lined up in this picturesque pose, and she has attached this doll to the balloon because she's going to send the balloon to be with her mom, because so that it can keep her company because she needs it more. They don't say any of this, but you get what's going on in it. So economy is storytelling just at its best, and of course she lets go of it, and it just slowly sinks to the ground, and her despair.
Oh my God.
Over that is ridiculous. And I'm telling you, that doll slowly sinking to the ground, that is a metaphor for your experience watching The Lodge. That's what's going to happen to you. That's what's going to happen to you.
All right. Okay.
You're that doll.
All right. So you guys we love Florence Pugh. Let's talk about Midsummer from a couple of years ago.
Let's do it. We're way over long, but let's talk about Midsummer. We
got 2 movies left, and they're 2 biggies. Midsummer.
Yep.
Go.
Hated it.
What do you think, Michael?
Hated it.
Get the tacos.
Oh, get the tacos.
This movie cost more than a couple of tacos. Florence Pugh again, who's great in it.
She's great. Yeah.
But
this movie is so stupid.
Every Shakespeare play, Joel, has a turning point, as you know, where whatever's going to happen is going to happen now, and you can't go back. The turning point that happens in Midsummer happens way, way too early. Not quite King Lear early in the movie, but just way too early. There's a point where you're like, the car is right there, gang. Go. What the hell are you still here for? Why are you still here? And it's a bridge too far. It's just a bridge too far for any reasonable thinking, operating person in any sort of normal sense of reality. Midsummer's it's another spin on The Wicker Man. It really just is it's a remake in all but name of The Wicker Man.
Sure.
It had its moments for me. Like, I was entertained by it. It's a very long film, which apparently has a 3-hour plus director's cut, which I can't imagine makes it better. Yeah. I hadn't seen it until now because I was waiting for that to come along, thinking, well, I'll watch that.
This movie,
I didn't hate it the way Michael did because I wasn't as insulted by it. I'm with him.
Michael, you said it made you angry?
I was so irritated by it, it made me angry.
This is from the makers of Hereditary.
It is. And it's like, here, Ari Aster, Hereditary was a big hit and everyone loved it. Go do whatever you want with no insight from anybody else to make sense of this semi-interesting, although reductive idea. So, oh my God.
We've talked about all these nifty little capsule-y indie horror movies. This is like Suspiria, the remake from a few years ago in other ways. It's a massive, big budget, overlong, over pretentious filmmaker jerking off. And even though this guy jerking off still produces some things that in a certain situations could be of use, it just, it all hits the carpet. It's not
this
worth
was
it.
a prime example for me. Within 20 minutes, I had shut off. I'm like, okay, done.
Yep.
I made it a little
And then the
longer than
movie's
20
another
minutes.
300
I made
years
it. I
after
made it
that.
to the cliff sequence before I gave up. I at least got that far.
Well, there you go.
I mean,
all
to
right.
me, the movie gets that far where it could still be good, and then after that.
But these are some of the dumbest characters. It's like you've got to give the audience some credit. I mean, yes, it's a horror film. People make stupid choices, but this is one of those like.
It's like that Geico commercial where the kids are and they're like, well, why don't we do it? Why don't we take the running car?
One of the characters played by
the dumb kid from We Are the Millers or whatever.
Yeah,
redhead kind of goofy howdy doody looking guy.
Yeah,
from like his whole. I'm like the whole
from the Maze Runner movies. I'm like, and what other things?
I don't get it. This is so stupid. I try to be a little more, maybe chatty about certain things, but this movie was just stupid. It was stupid. I hated it. Done.
It will try your patience. And even though there's some neat stuff in it, there's some neat photography, there's some neat design aspects to it that are interesting. I should have known I wasn't going to like this because the movie starts out with a person in a place of mourning and depression. And that is the scariest stuff in the movie, and that shouldn't be scary. The movie should be taking that stuff seriously, and then let this other stuff slowly get under our skin. And instead, it dives right into moody, oppressive horror atmosphere, and then tries to let up. And it's just tonally challenging and difficult.
All right.
For those of you on the video feed, you just saw a little wonderful cameo by my son.
I saw that. I saw
nice.
I didn't see
there. Mm-hmm. There he is. Hi, that's my son.
Buddy.
Hey,
be sure to skip Midsummer. It's
exactly. He can't hear anything what we're talking about. All right, so final movie of the list. We talked about it before, but Ryan has finally seen it. Dr. Sleep.
Yay. All right, you talk completely. It's all you.
I don't need to talk about Dr. Sleep. It's a sequel to The Shining. It shouldn't even exist. And yet it does. And it reminds me of Mad Max Fury Road. It reminds me of Blade Runner 2048 or whatever the hell the date is in Blade Runner sequel. You shouldn't be making a Blade Runner sequel. And yet you did, and it's kind of awesome. And is it as good as Blade Runner? No, but really, really good on its own terms. I was riveted by the screen. I just watched this last night, woke up today thinking about it all morning, wandering around in my own little world. And it's fantastic. The fact that it's divisive, it kind of blows my mind, but I'm being upstaged. And we will talk about Dr.
I was trying to keep
Sleep
it quiet for the audio. Rob had said that he felt that it did a good job of melding the movie and the book.
Brilliant job.
Okay, well there you go. So maybe that should be the big takeaway.
Brilliant job. I didn't.
One of the big takeaways, I should say.
The climax. They don't have enough time with it, so your return to the scene of the crime feels a little small and a little rushed. Even though the film I watched was 3 hours long on the nuts.
Agreed.
Sure.
But what can you do at that point? He's got the balancing act he has to make throughout the film is impossible, and it's the same way at the end. He's got to do The Shining again at the end, and to do it, you only got so much time. You've got to keep the pace up. He's got all these challenges, and even though it's not perfect, he just balances them so brilliantly that film completely pays off. It's just a masterwork by a guy working at an extremely high level right now in the horror world. We're all grateful to have Mike Flanagan. Holy Moses. Sure.
Well, that's great. Okay. Well,
and Carl Lumbly, Rebecca Ferguson, my goodness. They're all good. And you knew these people were good, but I think it's probably my favorite Ewan McGregor performance ever.
Well, there you go.
It's so good. He's got to do so little to keep the thing cooking along, and you got to still kind of believe in him. The little girl is spectacular. She's everything I hoped from the trailers that she would be. Cliff Curtis with his Colin Kaepernick hairdo was awesome. There's so much to love. I love it.
Well, good. That should take care of. Oh, I love you, son. It is the high holidays here when at Halloween time.
It's Halloween while we're recording this, so we should have expected something along these lines.
All right, gang. So we had. I hope you enjoyed our monster list of Halloween and horror, scary thriller flicks. Yeah, exactly, scary. And so we a whole bunch of lists. If you liked what you did we miss any? Do you have any major disagreements with us? You should absolutely reach out to us at the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on Facebook. Ask Joel and Ryan on Twitter and Instagram. You can also like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, and you can leave comments below. We'll get those, or you can write us directly at askjoelandryan@gmail.com.
Michael,
so that'll do it. Michael,
thank you for coming along with us, man.
Thank you guys.
You helped make the show.
Always being here. Yeah,
we appreciate it.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the same without you, my friend.
Tara.
Happy Halloween, everybody.
Happy Halloween, everybody. Woo.
Thank you for listening to The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Remember, all views and opinions represented in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the speaker and do not represent those people, institutions, or organizations that the speaker may or may not be associated with, unless explicitly stated. None of these views and opinions were intended to malign or deceive. And now, here's the producers, circa 1982, to play us out.